SSRIs and psilocybin. They both act on serotonin in the brain. They both change how you feel, but they do fundamentally opposite things. One dampens the system, and the other opens it up. And that difference explains why one keeps people in treatment for decades, while the other can produce lasting changes in a single session. I'm Clay Nickus. I'm a licensed therapist and Colorado's first fully licensed natural medicine clinical facilitator. And today, I want to explain as clearly as I can what psilocybin actually does in the brain, why it's different from anything else that we have, and what it looks like when it's working. So to understand what psilocybin does, you first need to understand what it's working against. Over years of chronic stress and avoidance, and if you haven't seen my first video, I go deep on what those terms mean, what I'm actually talking about. The brain develops these rigid patterns. You can think of them as deep grooves, like ruts worn into a dirt road. You fall into the same loops, the same anxious thoughts, the same defensive reactions, the same avoidance patterns, the same story about yourself and your life, who you are and who you're not. Neuroscience has a name for the brain region most associated with these loops. They call it the default mode network, or the DMN. The default mode network is a part of the brain that's active when you're not focused on anything external. It's where self-referential thinking lives. It's your sense of who you are, your running internal narrative about your life. It's your rumination. In healthy people, the default mode network is useful. It helps us plan, reflect, maintain a coherent sense of identity and self, but in depression and anxiety, in PTSD, and even healthy people who might have a little bit more anxiety, the default mode network becomes overactive and rigid. It gets stuck. The same thought cycles repeat endlessly. The same beliefs about yourself feel permanently true. Things like, I'm broken, I'm not enough, I'll never get past this, this is just who I am. If these sorts of things sound familiar, that could be rigid patterns in the default mode network. The deeper those grooves get, the harder it is to get out of them, the harder it is to see any other possibility. You're not choosing to think that way. It's not a choice that you're making in some sort of magical affirmation, positive thinking type of way. Your brain is literally stuck in a pattern that's really hard to exit. And this is where psilocybin comes in. Psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, is actually a prodrug to what we call psilocin. Psilocin binds to serotonin 5-HT2A receptors. It's the same receptor system that SSRIs interact with, but they interact with it in a completely different way. SSRIs increase the amount of serotonin floating around in the synapse. And the net effect is that they dampen limbic responsiveness. So they dampen the responsiveness of the animal body, the autonomic nervous system. They turn down emotional reactivity so that you can function. And that's why 40 to 60% of people on SSRIs report global emotional blunting. It's not a side effect, it is the mechanism of the drug. The drug is doing what it's designed to do, which is to make you feel less. Psilocybin does the opposite. Instead of turning down the signal, it temporarily disrupts the rigid patterns that have been running the show. Specifically, it reduces activity in the default mode network. Those deep grooves of thinking get shallower, the ruts in the road soften, and the degree to which the default mode network quiets down actually correlates with the intensity of the subjective experience of that rumination, of those thoughts. So a quieter, less active default mode network translates to a quieter mind, less ruminative, less fixated mind. Researchers at the Imperial College of London, specifically Robin Carhart Harris, who's kind of the neuroscience superstar of psychedelics, and Carl Friston, formalized this as what they call the REBUS model. REBUS model is relaxed beliefs under psychedelics. It's the idea that psilocybin loosens the brain's grip on its own assumptions, especially the rigid, self-reinforcing beliefs that keep people stuck. All of those cemented beliefs, I'm not enough, I'll never recover, this is who I am, this is how life is, I know who I am, and who I am is fundamentally corrupt. All of that has the opportunity to soften. We stop feeling like these are absolute truths, and we start feeling like these are just one perspective among many. And something else happens with psilocybin simultaneously, brain regions that don't normally communicate. Researchers call this increased entropy. It's increased functional connectivity between brain regions, and it results in more flexibility, more crosstalk, more possibility for new connections and new patterns. Subjectively, in your mind, this is like walking through a snowy field. And the places where you've been walking are well defined and clear. You can see your path. When you take psilocybin, the snow falls again, and those old pathways become a little bit less clear. It becomes possible to choose new paths, to choose new routes, to choose new ways of walking. When that happens, material that's been suppressed through avoidance, thoughts, emotions, memories, body sensations, images, all that's been locked away can finally come to the surface so that you can face it, so that you can process it, so that you can work through everything that's been hiding in the background of the mind. So that's the neuroscience. But what does this actually look like in a psilocybin dosing session? In psychedelic therapy, we work with a principle called the inner healing intelligence. The inner healing intelligence is this idea that every person has the innate capacity to heal, to grow, to move towards the most whole, most healthy version of themselves. The idea is that there's an aspect of you who already knows who you are. In internal family systems, another modality that I work with, we call this similar principle self with a capital S. It's the idea that inside of each person, there's an aspect of energy that is calm, clear, compassionate, courageous. Under ordinary circumstances, most of us lose access to this quality. We get identified with our pain. We get caught in the rumination of the overactive default mode network. We get fixated on negative beliefs about ourselves and the world. We identify with our anxiety, our trauma responses, our fear. We come to think, this is who I am. I'm the anxious person. I'm the depressed person. I'm afraid. I'm the person who can't get past what happened to them. I'm the person who will never be okay again. We identify with these things. Psilocybin provides the opportunity to break that pattern of identification. It brings people back into contact with themselves. And clients say things like, oh my God, I'm everything. Or I'm so big inside. Or I can't believe that I thought that was who I was. These are regular things that I hear in session all the time. Clients reconnect with something deeper. Something that's been there the whole time, but that's been buried under years of conditioning and avoidance. In sessions, I see clients experience waves of involuntary emotion. Shaking, sobbing, howling, laughter sometimes. Their body is finally completing a response that got stuck. It's feeling what hasn't been felt for a long time. Sometimes it's like decades of stored pent-up emotion is finally loosed, and the client experiences that. A person experiences what they haven't experienced for a long time, and that can be profoundly healing. It turns out, and this is sort of a trope or a cliche, that we really do have to feel it to heal it. That our way to a whole life is through the very emotions that we've been avoiding. And this is a critical distinction from SSRIs. A critical distinction from most of what modern day psychiatry offers. An SSRI suppresses the difficult material so you can function around it, which again can be useful in certain situations. But psilocybin surfaces the difficult material, actually brings people towards difficult material so it can be processed and released. One is avoidance with a prescription, and the other is confrontation with support. But, and this is a really important part, the drug alone, the psilocybin by itself, is not the intervention. Access to deep unconscious material without physical and emotional safety isn't therapeutic, it's potentially re-traumatizing. Access without safety could be overwhelming. So the medicine opens a path, but the therapeutic relationship and a well-crafted environment, such as what we create in psychedelic-assisted therapy, creates the safety to actually walk the path. Preparation before the session builds trust and intention. Support during the administration session holds the space for anything that arises. We sit there and we're with you for hours and hours and hours to support anything at all that comes up. And integration afterwards helps people make sense of what they experienced and to translate it into lasting, meaningful change. Indigenous peoples who have used psychedelics for healing across centuries understood this implicitly. They understood that psychedelics were inherently relational, that they inherently benefited from community support. They knew that healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in the context of relationship. We often say in therapy that wounds of relationship heal in relationship. And that's why the conversation needs to be about psychedelic-assisted therapy and not just psychedelics. The drugs, the substances, the medicines, the psychedelics, they create the conditions for healing. But the relationship with self supported by other, supported by community, creates the conditions that allow it to manifest. That's why the conversation needs to be about psychedelic-assisted therapy and not just psychedelic treatment. The therapy, the supportive relationship, a meaningfully well-constructed container creates the safety to process and to work through anything that comes up. Anything that's there. So does it actually work? What does the evidence show? Well, what we're finding in psychedelic research blows every other intervention out of the water by far. It seems that for issues like major depressive disorder, treatment-resistant depression, anxiety, even smoking cessation, psilocybin works better by far than anything that we have. We'll get into that in the next video. If you found this helpful, please subscribe. I'm Clay. Thanks for watching.